भीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी कृष्ण भानु सुतदेवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we were going to start with the 9th chapter today. I think we completed the 8th chapter last time. So I don't know, I see a little, lag in my laptop. Is my voice breaking up or is my video freezing?
Yeah, video is like lagging.
Perfect on my side.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, when you speak, your movements are coming later.
Okay. So only it's the problem with the video, not with anything else, right?
Yes, bro.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I think we can get started. I'll share my screen. So today we are going to start from the 9th chapter, which is one of the sweetest chapters in the Gita.
Prabhu, if you give me 30 seconds, I'll be able to chant along.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find.
Let me also try to stop my video and restart it. Maybe that might.
That'd be great. Works out perfect.
In 800 feet, at the traffic circle, take the 3rd exit onto New London Turnpike.
Okay, I think that didn't help.
I am good.
So we can start now, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so this is verse 9.1. Are you able to see my screen?
No.
Coming up.
It's coming.
How about now?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, all right. So let's recite this verse. You can repeat after me. Shri Bhagwan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Yagyatva moksha se shubhat.
Yagyatva moksha se shubhat.
Shri Bhagwan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Yagyatva moksha se shubhat.
Yagnatva moksha se shubhat.
Shri Bhagwan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam vijnana sahitam.
Jnana vijnana sahitam.
Yagyatva moksha se shubhat.
Yagnatva moksha se shubhat.
Anyone else would like to recite?
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagwan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
idam tu te guhyatamam
Pravakshyami anusuyave
pravakshyami anusuyave
gnanam vignana sahitam
jnanam vijnana sahitam
yajnatva moksha se shubhat.
yagyatva mokshase shubhat.
Shri Bhagwan Vacha
Shri
Shri
Bhagavan
Bhagwan
Vacha
Vacha
Idam Tute Guya Tatam Tamam
idam
idam tu te
tute
guhyatamam
yatamam
Pravakshyami Anasuyave
pravakshyami
pravakshyami
anusuyave
anusuyave
Jnanam Vijnanam Saitam
jnanam
jnanam
vijnana
vignana
sahitam
sahitam
Yagyanatva Moksha Subhat.
yagyatva
yajnatva
mokshase
moksha se
shubhat.
shubhat.
This was a hard one. I was trying.
No, you did well, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to recite? Okay, if not, we can start with the synonyms. Shri Bhagwan Vacha,
Shri Bhagwan Vacha.
the Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
idam,
Idam,
this,
this,
tu,
tu,
but,
but,
te,
they,
unto you,
unto you,
guhyatamam,
Guya Tamam,
the most confidential,
the most confidential,
pravakshyami,
Pravakshyami,
I am speaking,
I am speaking,
anasuyave,
Anasuyave,
to the non-envious,
to the non-envious,
jnanam,
Jnanam,
knowledge,
knowledge,
vigyan,
Vigyan,
realized knowledge,
realized knowledge,
sahitam,
Sahitam,
with,
with,
yat,
Yat,
which,
which,
gyatva,
Gyatwa,
knowing,
knowing,
mokshase,
Mokshase,
you will be released,
you will be released,
ashubhat,
Ashubhat,
from this miserable material existence.
from this miserable material existence.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Arjun, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement toward spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with the unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now, this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refers to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna simply. One can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale, Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani, Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Deshatarine. I read the translation one more time. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjun, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." So we have started with the 9th chapter today. We have almost completed half of the Gita. Not exactly. I think about 330 odd verses we have done, until the 8th chapter. And by the time 9th chapter will be finished, it's like halfway, because in the Bhagavad Gita we have 18 chapters, and the halfway is 9. So by the time we complete the 9 chapters, we would have completed about 373 verses. So total there are 700 verses. So a little over 50% of the Gita would be done. Now in the second half of the Gita, there are 2 very small chapters that come, 12th and the 15th. Both have only 20 verses. And the other chapters which are very small. Of course, the 18th chapter is the biggest chapter, and that kinds of gives a little, adds a little volume to the second half of the Gita. So the 8th chapter, if you remember, very categorically, it ended with a very soothing verse, that is Vedeshu Yageshu Tapah Suchaiva Daneshu Yat Punya Phalam Pradishtam Atyeti Tas Sarvam Idam Viditva Yogi Param Sthana Upayati Chadyam. Krishna had said that a person who accepts the path of devotional service, he is not bereft of the fruits derived from other paths. Other paths are Jnana, Tapa. Tapa is basically Dhyana Yoga, and the Karma Yoga. So everything that a yogi gets from the other paths, everything a person can get just by doing devotional service. And Prabhupada very expertly, he writes in the purport, Krishna consciousness is success in one shot, in one stroke, one single stroke, you get everything. And so here in the 8th chapter, towards the end, Krishna says that a bhakti yogi is not bereft of any results derived from other paths, but On the contrary, in the 11th chapter, he will say that whatever you can get from Bhakti Yoga, you cannot get that from other paths. Naham vede na tapasana jnane na chaijya. So very clearly, he establishes Bhakti Yoga as the supreme yoga. No other path can match up to Bhakti Yoga. So of course, Krishna does talk about different paths in the Gita. He talks about different processes. He talks about different objects of worship. In the 7th chapter, we had discussed. In the 9th chapter, again, Krishna is going to talk about different objects of worship. So there is a book written by one of the devotees, Satyaraj Prabhu. You might know. This book is called as Essential Hinduism. Very good book. The people who are new to Hinduism, sometimes they want to understand what Hinduism is all about. So it's a very nice book for them. So gives a lot of details about what exactly Hinduism is. So in that book, very expertly, he writes, Satyaraj Prabhu writes that Hinduism, it is like user-friendly spirituality. At whatever level a person is, Hinduism can give spirituality which can help him grow from that level. So therefore, there are many different paths mentioned. There are many different objects of worship mentioned, but that doesn't mean that there is no, there is definitely a best path and there is a best object of worship. And that is what Krishna establishes in the Bhagavad Gita. So having said that, in the 9th chapter, we see that after saying this in the 8th, towards the end of the Gita, towards the end of the 8th chapter, Krishna is in a flow. He continues speaking without any question asked by Arjuna. He continues speaking. This verse is a very significant verse. Idam tute guhyatamam pravakshyami suyave. I'm going to tell you the most confidential knowledge because you're not envious to me. Now we'll see that there are a lot of parallels between the 7th and the 9th chapters. I'll talk about it in a minute. Let me give a quick overview of the 9th chapter because it's a very significant chapter in the Gita. Prabhupada had once said, when someone asked that if I had time only to read one chapter of the Gita, which chapter would you suggest? And Prabhupada had said that you read 9th chapter, because 9th chapter, Krishna pours out his heart in the 9th chapter. Of course, Prabhupada himself writes in the purport that, these, whatever is mentioned in the 9th chapter, this will help those people who are not envious of Krishna. But in one sense, if we read 9th chapter and we try to understand what Krishna is saying, that also can help us become non-envious. Now, of course, devotees are not envious of Krishna. They accept Krishna's supremacy, his divinity, not just divinity, his supreme divinity. But others, people who are not devotees, even if they read 9th chapter, they can come to that platform, or at least they can try to approach that platform. So in the 9th chapter, it first starts with Krishna glorifying this knowledge. In the first 3 verses, he glorifies wholeheartedly about the knowledge that he is going to give to Arjuna. And then he starts talking about, so this knowledge, in one sense, the knowledge that Krishna is going to speak in the 9th chapter, this knowledge is knowledge that will engender pure devotion in the heart of the devotees. So what the essence of that knowledge is the relationship of Krishna with the material world, how Krishna is related to this material world, how he interacts, and how others in the material world interact with Krishna. So he will talk about his relationship with the material world from verses 4 to 10. And that relationship is inconceivable. It's very difficult to understand. Inconceivable doesn't always mean that you cannot understand it. Inconceivability is at different levels. So when we discuss the verses, I talk about how in the Siddhanta Darpan, Baldev Vidyabhushan talks about the relationship of Krishna with this material world. So Krishna gives the essence of his relationship with the material world in verses 4 through 10. Now, because his relationship with this material world is inconceivable, different people understand it differently. So in the verses 11 and 12, he talks about those people who completely get it incorrect. They just can't comprehend it. They get completely opposite. So those people are described in verses 11 and 12. Those are the Mayavadis. Then 13 and 14, he talks about those people who gets it completely accurately. And those are the devotees. So 13 and 14 talks about the devotees. And then 15 to 20 he talks about a category of people who were not discussed in the 7th chapter. Now, 7th, I was talking about there is a relationship or parallels between, lot of parallels between 7th and the 9th chapter. So whatever categories were described in the 7th chapter, those categories are also described in the 9th chapter. But Krishna takes it a little deeper. But in the 9th chapter, he adds one more category of people. These are the Vishwarup Upasakas. Vishwarup is people who consider Krishna to be distributed in the material nature. So they consider universe as an, they don't consider Krishna per se. They may not accept Krishna directly, but they understand that this universe itself is divine. So they worship the universe. And this universe is actually an expansion of Krishna. So in that sense, indirectly, they are worshipping Krishna. So that additional category is added by Krishna in the 9th chapter, which is not discussed in the 7th chapter. And then Krishna also talks about the Pratik-upasanas or the demigod worshippers, people who accept an object other than Krishna to worship. So now demigod worshippers were also discussed in the 7th chapter, but here Krishna will give additional insights about how demigod worship works and what exactly is the problem of demigod worship. Now, he did talk about it in the 7th chapter, but he'll give some additional insights over here. And after that, once he had described that, then he'll add his personal flavor over here, that how much he loves his devotees. So in the 7th chapter, Krishna had described his own glories. The 10th chapter also, Krishna is going to describe his own glories. In the 9th chapter, he, for the first time and for the only time, he talks about how much he loves his devotees and what can he do for his devotees. So that knowledge is not mentioned anywhere else in any of the chapters of the Gita. In the 12th chapter, again, Krishna, the name of the 12th chapter is devotional service. But there Krishna talks about mostly the qualities of a bhakta, of a devotee. What are the different qualities which kinds of makes a devotee likable to Krishna? So that is what is described in the 12th chapter. But 9th chapter talks about how much Krishna loves his devotees. So that is going to come out. Now that Krishna will talk about, he will contrast it, that what happens to demigod worshippers, what kind of results they get, and what kind of results are achieved by those who worship Krishna. So that is how Krishna will talk about in the 9th chapter. And that's how this 9th chapter will end. So this is like an overview of the 9th chapter. Now let me give a quick description on the parallels between the 7th and the 9th chapter. Now, if you remember the 7th chapter also, when Krishna starts speaking about the 7th chapter, he first glorifies the knowledge that he's going to speak. So there he says, Maya Sakta Manaha Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashraya. So here, that is the first verse of the 7th chapter. That make your mind attached to me. And how you can make your mind attached to me, that knowledge I'll give you. So hear from me. And here again, he's saying the same thing, not exactly the same, but kind of similar. Idam tu te guhyatamam pravakshyami nusaya. I'm going to tell you this most confidential knowledge. And this knowledge is going to free you from all, ashubha. It will give you liberation from all inauspicious things. That's how Krishna puts it over here. And then in the 7.2, Krishna had said, Jnanam teham vijnanam idam vakshyami ashishtaha yagyatva neha bhuyonyach Gyatvayam avashishyate, that after knowing this, there is nothing else will remain for you to know. You will know every single thing. That's how Krishna had put it in 7.2. And in 9.2, he'll talk about Raj Vidya Raj Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. That this is the king of the knowledge. And that's how Krishna will put it in the 9th chapter. And this is the most, and this is the supremely confidential knowledge, and this is joyfully performed. Susukham kartum avyayam. So we'll discuss it when we come to 9.2, that other paths, they are not very pleasant. The path of Gyan Yoga, the path of Dhyan Yoga, there are practical difficulties involved over there. So not very pleasant. But Krishna says here that this path, Bhakti Yoga, is joyfully performed. Now, how it is joyfully performed, Krishna will give glimpses of that in the 9th chapter. And 9.3, 7.3, Krishna had said, Manushyanam sahastreshu kasidyatil siddhayat. Out of many thousands of men, one may endeavor to know about me, and out of those who endeavor to know about me, only hardly out of thousands of those who endeavor to know about me, hardly one will actually know about me in truth. Tattvataha, that's how Krishna had put in the 7.3. Here, Krishna will talk it in a different way. He will talk about that what will happen if we don't understand Krishna. So Krishna will say that in 9.3 he kinds of says that people who don't understand Krishna or who do not have faith in Krishna, they will get repeated birth and death in this material world. So he puts it in a different way in the 9.3 chapter. Now after that we see, now there's not like a verse to verse correlation, but the same topics that were discussed in the 7th chapter. So in the 7th chapter, Krishna talks about that how he is the origin and he is the supreme reality. Mattaha parataram naanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. That's how 7.7 Krishna had said that. That there is no truth superior to me. So he is the supreme absolute truth. That's how Krishna had put it. Here also, he will talk about that how he is, and he is in one sense the creator, the sustainer, and the maintainer. And everything is Krishna. That's how Krishna will put it in the verses 4, 5, and 6. And then the 7th chapter, Krishna talks about his energies, that how he is the essence of the existence. Rasoham apsukanteya prabhashmi shashi surya. I am the taste of water. I am the fragrance of the earth. I am the light in sun and moon. So he kind of is the essence of the all existence. So here also Krishna will talk about that maya tatamidam sarvam jagada vyaktamurtina, that by me in my unmanifest form I have I'm pervading the entire world. But he'll also give glimpses of his Paramatma and Bhagwan features in the 9th chapter. So the same concepts, but he takes it deeper. So in the 7th chapter, then Krishna talks about that how there are different kinds of person who approach him differently. So first he talks about namam dushkritano muda prapadyante naradhama, those people who do not surrender to Krishna. So the same namam dushkritano muda verse that had come in the 7th chapter, a similar verse will come in the 9th chapter. 11th verse is avajananti mam muda. So the same word muda will be used. So people who consider Krishna's form as material, avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashita param bhava majananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. And then in the 7th chapter, Krishna had also talked about those people who surrendered to Krishna. Chaturvidha bhajante mam janah sukritino arjuna. There are 4 kinds of people who approach Krishna, and they are sukritino. Sukritino means they are pious people. That's how Krishna had put it. Although they might be approaching Krishna with a selfish motive, yet they are pious people. Sukritino, that's how Krishna puts it. And here Krishna will say the similar thing, but in a different way. Here he's talking about his pure devotees. So he'll talk about Daivim Prakritamashitaha Bhajante Anandamanaso Gyatva Bhutadim Avyayam. So they are under the protection of divine energy. So that kinds of tells us that the worship of Krishna is in a different category altogether. Sometimes people say, what's the difference? You can worship Krishna, you can worship this person, that person, or this god or that god. But Krishna's worship is in a different category altogether. All other worships comes in a material category, but Krishna's worship is actually transcendental. It is a different category altogether. And then Krishna also had talked about the demigod worshippers over there in the 7th chapter. He had said, yo yo yamyam tanum bhaktam shraddha architam ichchati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tame vididamyaham. That whoever wants to worship whichever form, actually I give them the faith to worship. And then here he also says that whatever results are given by the demigods, those results are also indirectly they're coming from me. The same thing with the deeper thrust he's going to talk about here. So he'll talk about that what is the problem of demigod worship. He'll first mention what is demigod worship and how people worship the demigods. Surendra Lok, what is that verse? Traividya mam somapa puta papa yagya rishtva swargatim prarthayante. So that's how he'll put it. That they, these demigod worshippers, they'll go to the Swarga, they will enjoy godly delights, but it's temporary. They'll again come back to this material world. And on the contrary, he is contrasted with his own worship. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janah pariupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam mahamyam. That I take care of them eternally, whatever they lack and whatever they have. I protect what they have, and I bring what they lack. And Krishna's worship gives eternal results. Yet the worship of the demigods, that gives temporary results. And then he will also add one more thing over there. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha natumam abhijanati tattvinatasya. So he'll say that actually, ye pi anya devta bhakta yajante shraddhanvita tepi mam eva kaunteya bhajante avidhipurvakam. So in the 7th chapter he had said that whatever, whoever wants to worship whichever form, actually I give them the faith to worship. And even the demigods, I actually give whatever results they give, that those results come from me. So that's how 7th chapter he had put. In the 9th chapter he will say that actually people who are worshipping other devtas, they're indirectly worshipping me, indirectly, because it is the whole system of demigod worship is established by Krishna. Therefore, because people are within that system, within that jurisdiction which was established by Krishna, they're indirectly worshipping Krishna. But he will say that because they don't understand that they are indirectly worshipping me, therefore tatpinatas chavanti, they will fall down again. Where will they fall down? They will fall down into the pool of material birth and death. That's what they will get eternally if they don't graduate from demigod worship to Krishna worship. And then he will end the 9th chapter by describing that even if a devotee commits the most abominable sin, and if he is fixed in devotional service, he will quickly become righteous. And he will say that Krishna will very categorically, he'll tell to Arjuna, you go and declare that my devotee will never perish. Name bhakta pranishyati, that my devotee will never perish. That is the promise that Krishna makes in the 9th chapter. And using that, he tells to Arjuna, man mana bhav mad bhakto madhyajimam namaskuru maam evishyasi yukto evam atmanam matparayana. Therefore, Arjuna, become my devotee, offer obeisances to me and offer sacrifices to me. If you are engaged like this, you will surely come back to me. So it's in a very sweet way, we'll end the 9th chapter. So that is like a contrast or the parallels between the 7th and the 9th chapter. So this, like the 3rd and the 5th chapter are also very similar. The concepts that are talked about in the 3rd chapter, Krishna elaborates on that in the 5th chapter, because Arjuna asked the same question. In the beginning of the 3rd chapter, he asked a question, and a similar question he asked in the beginning of the 5th chapter. Therefore, the same concepts are talked about in the 3rd and 5th chapter, but in the 5th chapter, he goes deeper. So similarly, in the 7th and the 9th chapter, now Arjuna doesn't ask any questions in both 7th and the 9th chapter, yet Krishna wants to make the points clear to Arjuna. So in the 7th chapter, it grows from the verse 6.47. So the 6th chapter is the Dhyana Yoga chapter, and Krishna establishes who is the topmost yogi. Yoginam api sarvesham madgate nantaram. That yogi who can contemplate on me, on Krishna directly, continuously. Such a yogi is the topmost yogi. That's how Krishna had put. But because Arjuna had said that, controlling my mind is very difficult for me, I cannot do this. Therefore, without Arjuna asking any question, Krishna continues to speak in the 7th chapter. So he then gives the alternative way to Arjuna to contemplate on Krishna. Maya asakta manah partha. That's how he starts. You can make your mind attached to me by doing this. So you don't have to do Dhyana Yoga, but you can do this. That's an alternative path that is given by Krishna to Arjuna. Similarly, in the 8th chapter was attaining the supreme. How to attain the supreme person, and that is the theme of the 8th chapter. And because Krishna had ended that a bhakti yogi gets everything, whatever results are derived by other paths, a bhakti yogi gets that, and he gets much more than that actually, that other people cannot get. So even that can be begotten by bhakti yoga. And because he had glorified bhakti yoga, he continues to speak about the glories of the bhakti yoga, and then he pours out his own heart, that how much he loves his devotees. So now in the 9.1, this 9.1 and 9.2 are very important. We see Prabhupada has given elaborate purports. When you see elaborate purports from Srila Prabhupada for any verse, you can understand that those verses are important. So 9.1 purport is not very long, but it's significantly long. But 9.2 is very long. The purport is like really big. So there are few places where Prabhupada has given such elaborate purports. Of course, in Bhagavatam, there are few verses where the purports runs into pages and pages. But in the Bhagavad Gita, you will not find such elaborate purports. 7.1 is one verse, 9.2 is one verse, 11.55 is one verse where Prabhupada gives elaborate purports. So these are some of the important verses of the Gita. Of course, 18.66 also. So idam tute guhyatamam. Now I'm going to give you this most confidential knowledge. So the name of the chapter is derived from this first verse of the Gita, where Krishna puts it that he says that this is the most confidential knowledge. So Prabhupada uses the title of the chapter as the most confidential knowledge. Now Prabhupada writes in the purport, what exactly is this most confidential knowledge? So guhya, guhyatara, and guhyatamam. So guhyatamam is like superlative. Guhya is confidential, guhyatara is more confidential, and guhyatama is most confidential. It's superlative. So guhya gyan is the knowledge of Atma. Atma is the soul. A person who understands the soul, who can understand that I am not the body, I am the soul, I am a spiritual being. Now he will not be bound. He will not be bound doesn't mean that he will be liberated. These are two different things. Liberation comes by the knowledge of Paramatma, Paramatma and Bhagwan. Just knowing the Atma will not let him bound in the world, but by the knowledge of Paramatma, he will get liberated. So actually, chapter 2 gives the knowledge about the self. And in the 5th chapter, there are glimpses, or there indirectly Krishna talks about Paramatma. So in these chapters, Guhya Gyan is mentioned, confidential knowledge, the knowledge of the self and the knowledge of the super soul. The Guhya Tara Gyan is described in the 7th chapter, where knowledge about Krishna is mentioned, but in a technical way, that how Krishna is the essence of the existence. His energies are mentioned, his material inferior energy and his superior spiritual energy is mentioned. So that knowledge is more confidential, Guhya Tara. And Guhya Tama is the most confidential, the knowledge about Krishna's heart. What is going on inside his heart. That is the most confidential, Guhya Tama. That's what Prabhupada also mentions here. And he says, Pravakshami anasuyave, that I am giving this knowledge to you because you are non-envious. So this is very significant. If a person is envious of someone, and if you suppose someone is, or I am envious of someone, of person A or person B, and person C comes and he glorifies person A in front of me, then I'll become more envious of him because I'm already envious, and if someone is glorifying that other person in front of me, I'll become more envious. So that's why Krishna also, he doesn't talk about his glories to Duryodhana and to others, because they're already envious of Krishna. He doesn't want them to become more envious of him, because it is also, in one sense, it's an offense to be envious of Krishna. So he doesn't, because he is Suradam Sarva Bhutanam. He is the most intimate friend of all living entities. He doesn't want people to commit offenses against him and, be bound in this material world. So this same thing, Anasuya way, in a different way, Krishna had told in the 4th chapter. And he kind of establishes that this is one of the qualification of receiving the knowledge of the Gita. In the 4th chapter, he had said, imam vivasvate yogam proktavanam avyam vivasvan maname praha manurikshvake bravit. This knowledge I had given to sun god, and now I am giving this knowledge to you. Evam parampara praptam imaraj rishavidu sakalena mahata yogo nashtaha parantapa. That's, this knowledge has come down in parampara, and now I am giving this knowledge to you. And then he adds a detail over there. He says, Sa evaya maya tedya yoga proktah puratana bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyam hetal. That because you are my devotee and you are my friend, that's why I'm giving this knowledge to you. So the same thing, Anasuya way, that non-envious, he had already said in the 4th chapter, that you are qualified to receive this knowledge because you are my devotee and you are my friend. So a devotee and a friend is never envious of the other person. So Krishna is kind of reiterating the same thing that he has talked about in 4.3. Bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyam. There also he had said that this is a rahasya, this is a secret, and I am giving this secret to you because you are my friend. So here also he's saying the same thing, that because this is the most confidential knowledge and you are not envious of me, I'm giving this knowledge to you. Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam, that by this knowledge and the realized knowledge. So actually sometimes people have this idea that, okay, spirituality is fine, but why do we have to perform rituals? So religion, so spirituality actually has two aspects. It has philosophy and it has practices. So philosophy is basically the nature of our existence, why we should do things, that what is the true nature of our existence. So that is actually philosophy, and this, we see that a lot of philosophy is discussed in the second and the third chapters, and the fourth chapter also. But religious practices are meant to give realization of that philosophy. Just dry philosophy is not going to help us. So we cannot dismiss every religious practice as a ritual that is not to be performed. So how this knowledge is to be applied, that Krishna will discuss here in the 9th chapter. We see when Krishna talks about it. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantasya dridvata. And then he says that, putram pushpam phalam toyam yume bhaktya prayachati. And then he says that yat karoshi yadashnasi yad juhosi dadasi yat. So he will talk about the practical application of this knowledge. So again, spirituality has two aspects. It has philosophy and it has religious practices. So sometimes people dismiss religious practices as rituals, but not every religious practice is a ritual. Those religious practices are meant to give us realized knowledge. So Gyan is sometimes, Shushka Gyan is mentioned. So Shushka Gyan is dry philosophy. But that dry philosophy, it can be applied in our life, and if it can transform our lives, that becomes realized knowledge, practically applied. And then he says, Yagyatva moksha se ashubhat. This will take you beyond all ashubh, beyond all inauspicious things. So Chakravarti Pad explains that in this word we have punya and papa. Punya is good and papa is bad. That's how we generally understand. But Chakravarti Pad said that both punya and papa are ashubh, because both punya and papa of this material world keeps us bound in this material world. So we have to go beyond both punya and papa. We have to go to a transcendental platform. So this knowledge, Krishna puts it, that actually it will take us beyond the punya and papa of this material world. So I'll take a quick pause and see if there are any questions or comments or corrections. I know I've spoken a lot. So I can discuss further, but let me see if someone has anything to add.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, you were talking about the confidential, more confidential, and the most confidential, right? Chapter 2, where description of the soul is mentioned. You mentioned about this is a confidential, more confidential. Chapter 7, where the energies of the Lord, and the most confidential, where the bhakti part is mentioned.
Yes.
But chapter 4 can't be considered in the confidential, more confidential part, because Krishna himself talks about him.
Yeah, so actually in the 4th chapter, you're right. He gives a glimpse about, he doesn't speak elaborately about himself. No, he just talks about that, he comes by his own will and why he comes. He doesn't give much knowledge over there. He says, I come to deliver the devotees to I annihilate the miscreants. So that's how he puts it. And then he says that actually, if you know about my janma and my karma, you will be liberated. You will not come back to. That's how he puts it. But he doesn't give any details over there. So, and then he comes back to the original topic that he was discussing. And this description that he gives about himself, that the glimpse of his glories, he gives because Arjuna asks the question. He says that, how do I understand that you gave this knowledge to Sun God? Sun God is millions and billions of years old, and you're almost the same age as me. So how do I understand this? And that's why, to clarify on that one point, so there is a section from verses 5 to 15 where Krishna talks about himself, but that's it, and then he doesn't give more detail over there. He moves on very quickly. So 4th chapter in that sense is categorized under the Guhya Gyan itself. It doesn't, because Krishna doesn't reveal much over there. He doesn't talk about his energies. He doesn't talk about his, how much he loves his devotees. So it cannot be considered as most confidential.
Not the most, more confidential.
I mean, yeah. So of course, these classifications are not watertight.
Okay.
It can be said that, yeah, it gives some knowledge at least about Krishna. It is beyond the soul. There is a like a supreme person that exists, that cares about the souls. Yeah, in that sense you can say. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Any other questions, comments? Excuse me. Okay, so if there are no questions or comments, I'll also mention about one thing that Chakravarti Path says. He says that actually the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Vedic literature, all Vedic scriptures. It's the essence, and he says that within the Bhagavad Gita, actually Bhagavad Gita, if we see, it is divided into 3 parts. So the first 6 chapters, they talk about the path of karma. The next 6 chapters, 7 through 12, they talk about bhakti yoga. And then the last 6 chapters, 13 through 18th, they talk about jnana. So these are the 3 broad sections within the Gita. So Chakravarti Path says that within the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic scriptures. So within the Bhagavad Gita, chapters 7 through 12 are the essence, because they give the knowledge about bhakti. And within chapter 7 to 12, he says that chapters 9 and 10 are the essence. And within 9 and 10, he gives one verse, 9.34. He says that is the essence of everything. It is that one verse is like the essence of the whole Vedic literature. And that one verse is Manmana Bhav Mad Bhakta Madhyajimam. Become my devotee and offer obeisances to me. And if you're engaged like this, you will surely come back to me. That's how Krishna puts it in 9.34. So we'll see that Krishna also, he talks about this in a different way in the 15th chapter. 15th chapter is the Purushottam Yoga, the opulence of the Supreme, the opulence of the Absolute, actually. And towards the end, he puts it in the same way, that whoever knows me as a supreme person, he engages in my pure devotional service. And he says, Idam, this is the most confidential of the Vedic literature. That becoming my devotee, knowing about my understanding that I am the supreme and becoming my devotee, this is the most confidential knowledge in the Vedic literature. That's how he puts it in the 15th chapter also. So this Guhyatamam will come one more time in the 15th chapter. Now, sometimes people ask this question also, that how is Bhagavad Gita the essence of the whole Vedic literature? Now, if we have to answer that, actually, if we see the Vedic literature, of course, it talks about the path of karma. The Vedas, the 4 primary Vedas, they talk about the path of karma. That path of karma is that if you have material desires and you want those desires to be fulfilled, and you accept God, and that okay, if I please God, then He will fulfill my material desires. That is the path of karma. So I do good things, and good things will happen to me, and all my wishes will be fulfilled. So the idea is that this place is a place of enjoyment, and I need the blessings of the Lord to enjoy in this place. That is the path of karma. One other path that is mentioned in the Vedic literature, in the Upanishads, it talks about the path of jnana. So the path of jnana is, it's opposite to the path of karma. So in the path of karma, people understand that this place is a place of enjoyment, and if I just please the Lord, I can enjoy in this world. Path of jnana is the opposite. They understand that this place is a place of misery. And the more I get attached to this material world, the more I'll suffer in this material world. Therefore, I want to get out of this material world. So that is something that Krishna will also talk about in the 13th chapter, verse 8 through 12. He talks about, he says, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam, that a person who has realized the problems of birth, death, old age, and disease, they indulge in Jnana Yoga. So in both these things, the path of karma and the path of jnana, the focus is me, because in the path of jnana, I want to enjoy, and therefore I should please the Lord. And in the path of jnana, because I am suffering this material world, therefore I should get out of this material world. That is, the focus is me, both the paths. And there is a third path that is described in the Smriti literatures. Smritis literature are basically the Puranas and the Itihasas. This is the path of bhakti. So path of bhakti basically talks about that, this place is, it could be a place of enjoyment, it could be a place of suffering, but more than that, this place can be utilized in the service of God. And people understand this devotees, the bhakti yogis, they understand that, it doesn't matter so much. I'm talking about the pure devotees, of course. Not all of us may have that kind of consciousness, but pure devotees understand that, whatever I'm suffering or I'm enjoying doesn't matter. The most important thing is to give enjoyment to Krishna, or whatever Krishna wants, I will do it. So this place is a place to utilize in the service of the Lord. That is the path of bhakti yoga. So all these three paths are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. And there is an additional thing. The unique thing about Bhagavad Gita is detached action is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So path of karma talks about that you be attached to the your actions and the results that you get from an action, and you act like that. If you're attached, that's how you act in the path of karma. Just get good things from God, please him and get good things. Path of jnana is completely renounce the world. Just go, renounce the world, don't get attached in this material world, and you will eventually will be liberated. But the attached or detached action, act in this world, still stay detached. So that is something unique about Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't clearly come in other literatures, in any of the other scriptures. So the karma yoga, the word karma yoga may come in other scriptures, but how karma yoga is to be practiced in action, that is not clearly mentioned in any other literatures. So Bhagavad Gita gives a lot of details about how detached action is to be performed. So that is like a unique thing about the Gita. So in that way, Bhagavad Gita is like the essence of the whole Vedic literature. But within that, we understand that Krishna wholeheartedly glorify Bhakti Yoga. 11.54 and 55, we'll see that he will completely establish Bhakti as the supreme path. There's nothing more superior to Bhakti Yoga. That's how Krishna will put it in the 11.54 and 55th verse. So I stop here. I don't think we can start the next verse 9.2 because the purport is also quite elaborate. Are there any questions or comments, any corrections, any realizations? Anyone would like to add anything? Okay, if not, then we can stop here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let's offer our obeisances to all the assembled Vaishnavas. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhyabhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.